chapel was originally built in 1886, and it's in the Queen Anne style with stick elements, and you can see there's a lot of whimsy in the architecture. It's almost like the big fat gables are tumbling over the front facade, and it has these nice festive colors, and we've kept true to that. But when the chapel was first built in the late 1880s, it was strictly as a funeral chapel for people who had been born in Hingham but had moved out of town, generally west, and wanted to be buried at home. But once they moved away, they weren't affiliated with a house of worship in town anymore. So the chapel was built to accommodate their needs to have a funeral service in the town and be buried in Hingham Cemetery at the same time. And then what happened was, by the early 1920s, the children and the grandchildren of people who had moved west out of Hingham, this Hingham wasn't home to them anymore. So it wasn't important to them to be buried here, and that's why the chapel kind of went defunct and fell into disrepair. And it stayed that way for 90 years. It just essentially wasn't used, just for some storage and things like that. We felt as a board, gee, let's bring new life back into this chapel and new life back into the cemetery by restoring it not just for funeral services, and some people do use it for that reason, but as a center for community life, to have parties in here and social gatherings and cultural gatherings and different kinds of get-togethers. And I'm happy to say all of that has come to fruition. We use the chapel all of the time for very happy and wonderful events, and it's really nice. As I recall, the Ames Chapel was first presented to CPC about 5 years ago in 2013. And what we said was that if the town, with CPC's help, voted to give us some funds to restore the chapel, we would make it available for town-wide use rather than just have it for memorial services. And that's exactly what we've done since the chapel was restored toward the end of 2015. We've opened it up for concerts and literature readings and dramatic performances. People have rented it at cost for weddings and birthday parties and christening parties, so the town really gets a lot of nice use out of it. We got the money in 2 different CPC cycles. The first year, 2013, we were awarded $280,000. We had asked for $310,000, and they said to come back the next year and ask for the other $30,000, and we did, and that was voted, as I recall, in 2014. The rooms of the chapel are the way they always were since it was first built 132 years ago. This was always the foyer, there was always a parlor, and there was always the great hall. That configuration hasn't changed. What we did was we restored the floors, and you can see the beautiful inlaid gumwood. It looks like cherry wood, but it's gumwood, and then the gumwood trim all around. The pews that you see are all original to the chapel. They were here since the beginning, and they were restored. The stained glass windows were all taken out, cleaned of more than a century of grime, and then put back in exactly the pattern that you see them. In the parlor, there was no furniture in it when we went to restore, and we made sure that we got period furnishings or furnishings to look like they were from that period. This is an original Victorian chair. This is an antique settee, and the other pieces go with the style of the late 1800s. This heritage wallpaper really reflects wallpaper that people would have used in that period. And these are copies of the original architectural drawings done to create the chapel. The architect was J. Sumner Fowler, he was a young man at the time, and he also designed what's currently Hingham's Town Hall. So that's kind of a nice little note there. Then if you come through the parlor, you'll come into the great room, and this is where all the parties take place and the gatherings. Again, beautiful stained glass windows. We had to put all of the chandeliers in. There was no lighting, so that's an addition. We brought walls back in. As I said, they were really down to the studs. There's a lift in the corner, and there's a brand new staircase. Originally, there was just a tiny little opening to a captain's staircase here, and it was almost like you were going down and up a ladder to use it to get into the basement, and it just wasn't going to work for big functions with 80 to 100 people. So we built a nicer, more gradually descending staircase with a better angle for people to get around. The trusses are original by the chandeliers. the stained glass window, the main stained glass window we had restored, and it's been called one of the most important pieces of a rolled opalescent glass in the United States. So the basement, which we're coming into now, was totally unusable. It was really a cellar. And as I said, we dug down 3 feet to create enough ceiling height to make it a pleasant place to be in. When we had water brought in, we built a caterer's kitchen so that caterers can do prep here for light meals and things like that, although you can also have fancy meals come in, but this is a start for caterers if they want to go this route. The floors are slate. These are new. There's radiant heat under them, so it feels very warm and toasty in the cold weather, and that's true for upstairs as well. We also have beautiful restrooms that we never had before. A lot of people comment on how much they like them. The entry to the women's restroom is particularly nice, with marble and beautiful basket weave tile on the floor and subway tile on the walls with a black trim. People seem to really like that. And the decorating was done by Sue Bush, who's an interior decorator. She's on our board, and she was helped by Ann Kimball, who's also on our board. All the colors and the nice finishes that you see, they had so much to do with. And the person responsible for actually making it happen is Ben Wilcox. He was our contractor, and he was just terrific. One other thing I'd like to show is since we've completed the building, we have gotten so many awards, architectural awards. We received an award from Preservation Massachusetts, which is the Paul and Nikki Tsongas Award for putting the building back together. We received a preservation award from the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and we also received an award from the Hingham Historical Society, and we're proud of all of those awards, saying, hey, you guys did good work. The actual restoration cost just under $1,988,000. So some of the money came from CPC, and that was great because it means that all of the town people have a vested interest in this chapel. Everybody in town who pays real estate taxes helped to pay for the restoration. We also did a lot of private fundraising, wrote up grants and got monies from different places who give out grants, and we put in some of our own endowment. And it went into a total restoration. It wasn't a gut job in the sense that there was much to restore that was already here, but it was a complete, it went from being not usable to usable. And we made it ADA accessible as well. I'm standing at the top of a ramp that people can use to get up to the chapel with a wheelchair if they need. And there's also a lift in the chapel, so people don't have to take the stairs to the lower level. The reason it was so important for me to get this building restored, and is important to me to get other historical assets of the town restored and preserved, I can tell you this from my own personal viewpoint. I grew up in a very gritty section of New York City with a lot of nondescript brick buildings. There was nothing inspiring in the streetscape to walk by every day. And when I came to Hingham, I always felt I was living in a postcard. And I feel that it's important to preserve that aspect of life in Hingham, to enhance the feeling that we live in this incredibly beautiful pastoral setting. And so much of it is preserved by good thinking ahead by people who came 100 and 200 and 300 years before us. And I think we have to pay it forward for the generations to come, to hold on to the beautiful historical assets we have and make them usable and in good shape down the line so other people get to live in this beautiful postcard after us.